That's it. Here, squat next to me. Just squat. It was just a little bit cold, wasn't it?
Really? What's going on here? Are those all almonds?
Yeah, all these soldiers.
They don't look like they're almonds.
They might be relatives of soldiers too. We've got plenty of sausages. Just need some bun.
Dad, are we cooking it? Can we still go to this big sand dunes?
Go back and have a play in a bunch.
Oh, yeah, can you have a look away?
She got some really nice
Well, pretty much. Yeah, I've got cream soda. Yep, yeah, I haven't got the coffee.
Cordial as well.
What time do you want to get going? We'll be back at the loading here.
We get up there, we go swim over.
Okay. So you'll be in the boat ready, so we'll be off this weekend. Something around. Well, we change the semi to
I'll ask Daryl will be the best place to meet her.
in the middle of the ocean. In the middle of the ocean.
That's not
I'll just check with you about time and that too.
What do you give you?
Nothing that big is going to sleep.
He said he gave you $1 million and now he's talking about some
Picks up everything.
Stand up in a minute. Stand up. Respect. No, not yet. I'll let you know when you got. Seems to be. Please stand for a second,
Ask me a question. That's my sister. He doesn't jump forward.
pray the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. This day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever.
I'd like now to introduce our guest speaker from the SAIL RAAF. Yep.
Mr. President, ex-servicemen and women, members of the RSL, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, good morning. What a beautiful day for this. It's awesome. It's just perfect, isn't it? Before I commence my address today, I'd like to convey that of mine and my fellow serving members, our appreciation for being invited to be part of the Loch Sport Anzac Day Remembrance activities. And I further pass on the appreciation of the RAF East Sale Base Commander, Group Captain Facina. I'll start by saying we're here today to not celebrate war, but to celebrate the lives and the courage of our Australian and New Zealand servicemen and women, and that they have given the ultimate sacrifice for their country or across all conflicts. It may seem strange that we're here to remember a military fail, a battle that ideally we lost, but there are so many more reasons, important reasons that is, why we are here today. The Gallipoli landing was the first time that Australians had fought under the Australian flag. Yes, there have been other Australians in conflict since then, these being the Sudan and the Boer War. But these were served under the Union Jack as part of the British colony. So Gallipoli can be considered the birthplace of the Australian Army at war. Despite massive losses suffered under extreme hardship, the soldiers fought with such courage and vigour, but more importantly, stood by each other, developing mateship, for which Australian and New Zealand servicemen and women are famous for today, this forming the Anzac spirit. The Gallipoli campaign was one of Australia's worst disasters. During the 8 months on the Turkish peninsula, 7,600 Australians and 2,500 New Zealanders were killed or either killed or mortally wounded. Gallipoli was arguably the first test of Australia and New Zealand's tolerance to such great losses. The meaning of the Anzac spirit today can be expressed in a lot of ways. To some adults, especially ex-servicemen and women, it's a day to remember mateship, mates lost and hurt at war. Others remember their friends, relatives who didn't come home and are buried in foreign countries. Anzac today, with friendships are renewed and soldiers, airmen and sailors relive both good and hard times together. Anzac today, we will all come together to talk about mateship and courage. This Anzac Day, we also need to remember all those women, both here and overseas, that supported the war effort. Not just the servicemen the servicewomen and nurses in the front lines, but also those left behind looking after factories and farms at home, as well as the wives and girlfriends that kept the home fires burning. So what is the present status of the Anzac tradition in today's multicultural environment? Some would say, without national crisis, it lays dormant. I strongly believe it is ever present and is just as strong today as it was back then, especially amongst our ex-service and current serving members. More recently, Australian roles in the Gulf War, Cambodia, Vietnam, Somalia and Afghanistan places us in roles as aides to members of the United Nations peacekeeping forces. It serves to remind us the Gallipoli spirit is still relevant for Australia today as it was decades ago. We may no longer be seen as an oppressor, but our mere presence serves and shows the world our concern for people on a global scale. As I'd said before, we are not here to celebrate or glorify war, but we are here to take pride in our freedom and our Australian way of life. We must prepare when the time comes to take a stand and defend our birthright. This is the time when we shall remember the spirit of the Anzacs, their unquestionable dedication to their country and their countrymen, their valour, their camaraderie and their firmness in their time of adversity. The spirit born from atrocities of war served as a celebration of our nation and our national pride. This is not to be forgotten, lest we forget. Thank you very much.
That was all right, wasn't it? Good.
The hymn, Fight the Good Fight.
Thank you. It's now my pleasure and privilege to introduce Emily Devine, a local councillor. Emily comes down for all of our functions, Australia Day, Anzac Day, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you, Emily. And Emily, I'll get you to introduce the youth councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Beside me, I've also got our youth councillors, Molly Webster and Mitch Winbach. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Gunai people, and pay respects to their elders, past and present. Thank you for having us today here, Mick, and Greg Moon, Lochport RSL Sub-Branch President and Vice President, and obviously our youth councillors and defence personnel, and ex-servicemen and women, and RSL members. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this important ceremony of remembrance for Anzac Day, a national day of significance for both Australia and our local community in Wellington. From now, and for the next 4 years, Australia commemorates the Anzac centenary, marking 100 years since our nation's involvement in the First World War, from 1914 to 1918. Anzac Day itself honours the anniversary of the first major military action in Gallipoli, fought by Australian and New Zealand forces during World War I in 1915. Today in Lochport, I'd like us to remember the sacrifices and commemorate the lives of all Australian servicemen and women killed in wars, conflicts and peacekeeping operations. I ask you to think of the sacrifices that not only they have made, but their families have also made. The Anzac spirit, which brings to mind the personal qualities of courage, mateship and commitment, continues to have meaning and relevance. Without our men and women who have served and who are currently serving, we might not be standing here in the beautiful town of Lochport honouring the Anzacs. To mark this Anzac centenary, the Victorian Government has called on the public to share Victoria's stories and remember the contribution of our World War I servicemen and women. I would encourage you all to visit our library or go online to the Anzac Centenary website and share Wellington's local stories, honouring those who have volunteered to protect our beautiful country. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Now to one of my favourite parts of the service. I'm hoping we've got some Lochsport primary children here. Primary school children, if you come forward. And they're going to read us a poem. I'd like to introduce you. This is Emily, Carla, who we know, Lacey, and Jan.
A tribute to Anzac Day. With their hair a little whiter, still their step not quite so sure. Still they march on proudly as they did the year before. Theirs was the hands that saved us, their courage showed the way. Their lives laid down for us that we may live through.
From the ripples rugged hillsides to the sands of Alamein, on rolling seas near the skies, those memories will remain. Of airmen and the sailors, of both Clyde and Silver Bay, the boys of Darnell are remembered on this day.
They fought their way through jungles, their blood-soaked desert sands. They still remember comrades who rest in foreign lands. They remember the siege of Alta Brook, the mud of the Kokoda Trail. Some paying the supreme sacrifice with courage that did not fail. To the icy land of Korea, the stingy jungles of Vietnam, and the heroic battle of Capiron, and that epic victory at Long Tan. Fathers, sons and brothers, together had fought and died.
That we may live in peace together, while at hand their mother's side.
When that final beauty calls them to cross that great divide, those comrades will be waiting when they reach the other side.
Thank you very much, kids. I'm not sure what happened to John. He didn't get to say a word. Probably in training, I guess. Yes.
The anthem, God Save the Queen. To bring to you briefly some human emotions so it touches where we are today. Now, there's a very fine line between evil and good, and we fall into evil when we glorify war and when it becomes a personal fight between the Han or the Nazis, the Japs or the Commos or whatever. And all sorts of evil atrocities occur on both sides. However, war is not glorified when we meet to remember and honour those with whom we've served, our friends, our comrades, alive and those who have died. Indeed, it's the human emotions of grief and love and memory that bring us together and which unite us. I remember my granddad, one of three blokes, three brothers from Druin, who enlisted in World War I. Gallipoli, Palestine, and the Western Front. Gallipoli claimed one of them. I remember 5 brothers from the small soldier settlement communities where I grew up. Only one returned. I remember my father and 2 of his brothers who enlisted and saw action in Palestine and New Guinea, and one Uncle Jack, after having a ball at the end of the Palestine campaign, went on to lay in New Guinea, only to be killed by a sniper's bullet whilst trying to bring back a wounded mate. And the chaplain who buried him, and who later became the bishop who ordained me. And so the list continues, and you will have your own list of memorable people, some family, some friends, some good and honourable, some scoundrels among them, but all are united as a body of people who we remember today with gratitude for their service to their country and to us. Many of those paid the supreme sacrifice in war. And it's such people who bring a human element to Anzac Day, who give us a face of flesh and blood, who are a part of us individually, and who are a part of the fallen whom we honour today. Anzac Requiem will now be read by the Vice President, Greg Moon.
The Anzac Requiem by Dr. C.E.W. Bean. On this day, above all days, we remember those Australian men and women who died or suffered in the great tragedy of war. On the morning of April 25th, 1915, Australian and New Zealand troops landed under fire at Gallipoli, and it was then, and in the violent campaign which followed, that the Anzac tradition was forged. The elements of that tradition have inspired and offered an enduring example to later generations of Australians. Each year, we pay homage not only to those original Anzacs, but to all who have died or were disabled in their service to this country. They enrich our nation's history. Their hope was for the freedom of mankind, and we remember with pride their courage, their compassion, and their comradeship. They served on land and sea, and in the air, and in many places throughout the world. Not only do we honour the memory of those Australians who have fallen in battle, we share the sorrow of those who have mourned them, and of all who have been the victims of armed conflict. On this day, we remember with sympathy those Australians who have suffered as prisoners of war, and those who, because of war, have had their lives shortened or handicapped. We recall staunch friends and allies, and especially those of the first Anzac Day. May we and our successors prove worthy of their sacrifice.
I will lay the sub-branch of wreath, followed by the Women's Auxiliary, the RWS, the Wellington Shire, Worcestershire Youth Council, Stockport branch of the Red Cross, the primary school, and any members of the community who wish to lay a wreath or a poppy or pay their respects, please do so. Thank you. The last post of the clock. Age shall grow not old, yet wisdom left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, over the years we've had a very valued member of our RSL, Peter Elliott, used to raise the flag for us. Unfortunately, Peter Elliott since passed away, so I've asked Brenda Elliott, Peter's wife, to assist us with raising the flag this year. So Brenda. This year I had a letter from a youth counsellor from Wellington who had been to a couple of RSL and Anzac places and noticed that there wasn't necessarily a New Zealand flag at these RSLs. So I'd like our youth counsellors to go back to the council and tell them we have a New Zealand flag and we also play the New Zealand anthem. Thank you, Bob. Now the Australian anthem, and I'm sure we will all sing with great gusto. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes our service. There's a couple of thanks I would like to make. First of all, I'd like to thank you all very much for coming and helping us to not celebrate, but remember our fallen and injured. Now, I'd like to thank Councillor Emily Devine for the Wellington Shire, Youth Councillors Molly Webster and Mitch Limbeck, the RAF personnel, who every year do a great job for us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the RAF people. Lochport Primary School, and RAF knows as well, that's fantastic. Our sound technician Bob, you did a good job this year, no mistakes at all. Good on you, Bob. My committee and executive of the RSL, thank you to them, and all of the members of the RSL. They are all invited to come back to the club. Not all at once, you probably wouldn't get called in there. Come back to the club, we have a lunch on, barbecue lunch, for very little money, just a donation. The bar's open, and we'd love to see you back there. I heard some rumour that service personnel aren't allowed to drink in their uniforms, so you're allowed in your jocks and singlets and stuff. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. See you back at the club.
Thank you very much. So now we're all good.